Welcome back to the Morning Skate podcast. I'm hoping this is working. Probably have a little time to kill before Matt gets in, so hopefully my voice holds up. I certainly not feeling 100%, but not terrible. I'm gonna get right into things. Cover a little bit of Underdog before we get started. While again we wait for Matt to join us, he texted me just a little bit ago saying that he would be he's still eating dinner, but Underdog released their contest, 50 max entry, 3K to first. Not a bad way to start things. So I'm gonna do a couple of those while I wait for Matt. And as I join the first lobby, there are waiting for three. We'll see how that goes. I'll kind of talk about some overview of the slate as we get into things. Yeah, if anyone wants to join this, and then we'll get right into DraftKings as soon as Matt joins in. But yeah, no, I mean we have hockey's back. It's 3 gamer. The toughest part about Underdog is, of course, if you draft Jeremy Swayman, make sure to set your rankings to put in Corpusalo. We don't have 100% confirmation, but Swayman did sign in Boston on Sunday after a whole bunch of rigmarole. It happened. He just signed. It was exactly what we thought was going to happen, just maybe a little bit sooner than we thought. I kind of don't know why it's automatically assumed he's going to go. I know Montgomery said today that he could play, but I mean it's been a day. I know we've been practicing, but it just seems kind of crazy that they already named Corpusalo the starter and they would just pivot immediately back. But regardless, if you get into these streets, number one, I would say first and foremost, like I've been saying this since the first Underdog draft I've ever done for the battle royales. Like goalies really don't matter as much as people think, especially I think in this format. They project incredibly well because the winning goalies are going to score pretty well, but like they just pick a couple favorites and then everyone else gets nuked because they're not supposed to win. When in reality, these games are much closer to a coin flip than anyone drafting them seems to imagine. Anyone that's auto drafting is going to just take goalie right at the beginning, gives you a lot better chance to set up a better correlation, something that gets underutilized in this space. It's 3K to first, so it's not, complete pennies. It's not peanuts. I think that this is certainly a spot that I want to try to get down as much as I can, but won't be as much as I'd like because the slate does lock at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. I have no idea. Like originally when I saw, I was like, "Oh, Seattle for 1 o'clock." I was like, "Oh, it's a holiday." I'm like, "No, it's not. It's a Tuesday before Columbus Day the following week." I have absolutely no idea why that happened. Just it's nonsensical garbage. Going position. I'll go position by position for a second. Center. That like I think one good rule of thumb, especially if you don't know a lot about hockey, is to just take the DraftKings pricing and bring it over here and give it a look and see, just what that looks like to begin. Nothing is uber standoutish. Like I do think at the top, I mean, I think the number one center on the board is probably honestly Bedard. And he's third here in projection. Like I kind of lean Bedard number one at center. I think winger is definitely where you want to prioritize at the beginning though, because there's like five that or really I mean Cairo and Gunther are there. But like I think it's like pretty crazy. I mean Keller, I don't have three either, but like Pasternak is going to be my 101 for sure. I think two, you could kind of argue between a few guys. Let's keep in mind Reinhardt, Verhage, and Barkov will all go together. That's gonna be one of the hardest correlations to get. But if you get into any of these drafts where a couple people take goalie early, someone take Pasternak, you grab Barkov. Now the next auto drafter goes to Chuck and then McAvoy. The other guy, for whatever reason, you could get like a back to back where you could grab Reinhardt Verhage. Like I definitely think that you should be coveting those correlations a little bit higher, especially on a 3 game slate, just because the amount that has to go right, it gets diminished by a lot for you to win. I think that on a bigger slate, I'm a little bit less inclined, especially to go after a 3-man stack. But I do think correlation is the one thing that most of the auto drafters can't get to, or at least get to well or easily, because they are very distinct. Some correlations can get there without the 5-on-5. I know, for example, Matt Tkachuk and Reinhart, it's not like they haven't won slates before together. It's just that they're not going to play at 5-5. It definitely diminishes the upside. Again, going position by position, I think at center, Barrett Hayton is going to be a guy that doesn't get drafted all that often. His rates aren't anything to go crazy about, but he certainly is going to be on the top power play in the top line with Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz. So that just seems to me like a guy that you could easily jam in with Clayton Keller and feel good about. Shane Wright's someone that I will be drafting. He just profiles really well in the scoring system. Maybe not for blocks and hits, but shots and, goals, which are pretty important. Not exactly the line I thought he'd be on, but he's definitely, he's on the power play with Brandon Montour. It's not like he's on a power play that is unusable by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think that too far down the line, there's all that much. Reichel is out. Bolduc is out. Well, I mean, at least it seems like Reichel is out. Bolduc was sent down. I wouldn't get crazy down the board at center, but I just don't think that there's that many comparatively to wings where I think more people will probably be getting their flex in. I'll go to defense for a second, then I'll go back to wing. So DraftKings scoring system is pretty, their pricing is actually pretty similar here. The standout on both sites, and we'll get to, is Mikhail Sergachev, top line, top power play, not being treated like that in any of these scoring systems. He definitely has more of your rates in all categories that you like to see. I think he's, I mean, he's just so mispriced on DraftKings as well. It seems kind of crazy. And I get that Jersey is also great. And I don't even think you're wrong to take either of them in this format where like those are clearly the guys that are going to produce very well in a great matchup. But I do have Sergachev a bit above. I mean, definitely. And I know Andrew Peeke will block and hit, but like, Jesus, like the guy is getting 3 points. I don't understand. Ekblad's not in the top power play. So like, let's just go through the teams and go through their top power play really quick. McAvoy, Seth Jones. Seattle's a bit debatable, honestly. Like McCann is on the Dunn unit, and then Bjorkstrand's on the Montour unit. Like I said, Shane Wright's on the Montour unit, but Beniers is on the Dunn unit. All of this to say that Vince Dunn is all the way down here on one of the top power plays and a guy that does produce in all the categories. So I don't really get that either. There's only 4 drafters. That means there's probably only 4 defensemen going. I don't really see many scenarios where you're not getting McAvoy, Seth Jones, Montour, Sergachev, or Falk. The power play in St. Louis will run through Justin Falk, also a guy that can be an all categories player. Like, I think if you're taking anybody else, you're probably wrong. I guess Forsling is the only other one that is even in consideration, but not for me on neither power play. I just can't imagine how that's going to last, but I'm not going to argue. I mean, he's going to see big minutes, but like, I wouldn't force a defenseman in with Florida just to force him in. They have 4 forwards to stack around. And the top power play is Adam Boqvist, which we just don't know yet what that's going to look like. The one thing about Adam Boqvist, and the only thing that makes him draftable, is he has had a propensity to score goals. I don't know if that's going to continue. It shouldn't, be considering his role should be diminished from what it once was at that time. But again, the top power play is, Florida is going to be one of the best power plays in the league, and Boqvist is going to start there. Will it last? Who knows? Will he play 12 minutes? I think that's more likely than not. So in this system, I think that my number one, I don't know how many I'm going to get in. There's no way I'm going to find a way to get 50, especially if they're feeling this slow tonight, because boy, howdy, I am not going to have a lot of time tomorrow. I think that my highest owned guy will probably end up being Sergachev because I won't covet defense, and I think others will. There's Matt now. I'll give him a quick second. You know what, Matt, add yourself to the stage when you're ready. I'm sure you can hear me. Already ready.
Indeed.
I've had this up for probably 7 minutes, and it's
No way, really? Oh my God. This fucking website.
It just sucks because I can only really draft tonight. I'm going to run through, I'm going to make probably the 3 biggest points I've gotten to, and I want you to tell me if I'm right or wrong. Number 1, is that goalie doesn't matter nearly as much as the field thinks.
Definitely true.
And
Especially on these slates where there's no ADP given. I think that's on 3-game slates or smaller. They just don't give ADP, which is nice because those projections are obviously just nonsense. Like, yeah, they're probably somewhat close to accurate, but the medians truly do not matter in this
yeah,
format.
right.
So that's
Yeah.
especially where, like, just don't draft the goalie in the first round unless you're really, really confident in, like, you're building a late round stack or something of two teams with players that don't go in the first round, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say that the one caveat is, like, if you're drafting 50 and you get to 40 and you've had zero Bobrovsky. Do you think Swayman's starting?
Uh, I don't, but I did see that news, and
Yeah.
so it certainly seems like he's gonna dress, which
Yeah.
uh, my guess is he's in for the home opener though. On I think it's Thursday.
Oh, we're gonna do the DraftKings slate next, but what I'm saying is, like, the one point I made from the beginning was, if you go to DraftKings and you look at the pricing over there, I think it's a more efficient way of starting your process for, like, go through the positions and just say, like, oh, like, this player is wildly mispriced comparatively. Now, it's not always perfect, and we're going to go through some of these imperfections that we want to be targeting on the slate, but I do think at, like, center, for example, you know, when you consider only 4 centers are probably going in most drafts, we'll say, maybe 5 or 6 at the most. Like, I just don't really understand why Sam Bennett's 4. He's not in the top power play, for example. And if you go to DraftKings and you looked at the center pricing, you would see that kind of stands out as, like, oh, wait, like, I guess he's actually kind of expensive. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter as much there as it does at wing, but I was, kind of surprised by some of the, like, I mean, Frederick is projected higher than, like, actual first line or top power play guys in Buchnevich. Like, it just, again, like, there's some certain things like that where I think if you start, because there's no ADP, like Matt's saying. So, like, if you start by going through and just picking out a guy that you didn't see, being like, oh, okay, like Jordan Cairo, good example. I don't know. Well, it's actually better than I thought, but it's not great. I think defense is really where it's like, what the heck is going on? Like,
Yeah, I mean, there's also on this slate, there's like no real standout defenders, so that's a huge part of it too. Like, this slate
yeah,
is just pretty
yeah,
unique in that there's 6 teams, but really, like, is Seth Jones the best D-man out there? Um, like, that's pretty tough to parse out.
right. I agree. So that was point number one. Again, with goalie doesn't matter that much. And point number two was, I guess it kind of goes hand in hand though. Like, so again, that's the first thing. The second thing is wing is very, very important not to get buried on. It was kind of where I was going with this. And then correlation within that in a 3-game slate is very important. So depending on what pick you get, and again, Pasternak, I think, is clearly the number one player on the board. You could try to argue a couple of guys. I don't think I'd listen. But again, if you get Pasternak, that could change your next pick to what you want to correlate with a little bit more. Pasternak's a little bit unique in the sense that his center, actually, he's second. Holy crap. Yeah, I don't know. I guess the point is, take what the room gives you, but don't get buried at wing. Don't draft goalie too early. Defense matters not that much on this slate in particular because there is no standout. Probably only 4 are going in most lobbies, and you can get a very good option later on. I think that's a long-winded way of saying that.
Yep.
I'd like to
Every
fully
so
elaborate, but we're
unlike
not.
in best ball, if people are transitioning from best puck and just trying out NHL to chase the 3K up top, you obviously score everyone. It's just like the daily drafts elsewhere. So, like, taking 3 wings to fill 2 slots, like, that's just a flex. And so typically your centers are going to be your better scoring options, but the smaller the slate, of course, the more volatility there is to that assessment, just because it could just be different teams having different levels of center versus wing depth as far as fantasy scoring goes. So that's just another thought. It's very funny that like literally you can't fill this.
It's
That
yeah,
like
not
that's
not
really
great.
sad. Yeah.
I'm not gonna wait around much longer. I feel like I will be in the lobbies tonight, and I will be drafting, and hopefully they start filling. I just people are literally just gonna watch Monday Night Football and not draft hockey, and it's an embarrassment, really. Uh, there is no best buck resurrection ever, but I'd love for it to exist one day. I'm not sure why Matt
Yeah.
got kicked off.
Yeah. No, that
Did I do
I
that
mean,
somehow?
wait, did you do what?
You got kicked off for a second. I brought you back
Oh
in.
yeah.
I'm not sure what happened there,
No.
but you may have clicked the button, or
Oh,
maybe I did. But do you have anything to pull up for now, or do you want me to just pull up the DraftKings slate?
just pull that up. I'm working on getting my sheets set up to like just go through the players and the lines that we have, but that's probably going to be another 5 minutes or so. So I don't know if you want to vamp or do
I can
whatever, and then
vamp.
we
Well,
can
yeah,
just
no.
get into
I just
the DK slate. Um,
before I start doing
but
that, I guess I got to leave this lobby too, though, because it's
yeah,
eventually
have
going to
you?
start.
Here's another question before we get started on DFS. Have you looked at any of the bets? Just any of the
Yeah,
sportsbook odds or underdog props or anything like that? Because I took a look and found a few interesting things.
you'll never guess what I just pulled up. So yeah, we'll start there then. Let me zoom in a little bit. I'm not going to place anything probably this second, just because signing in and then doing all that stuff on my computer right now is not going to. I was signed in already, but the location, whatever. So 3 games, low totals, not that crazy. None of them are standing out as far as like, and again, like the biggest favorites, Utah minus 170, which is more, again, back to the point of like goaltending is so marginally important here on a slate that no team is, better than what is minus 170 equal, like 40,
Uh,
42%. What I can't think of my head.
it's
My
like
brain is
just
not
so. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you're saying minus
38.
170 or plus 170?
Minus 170. That's like the biggest favorite.
Yeah,
I swear
that's
to God,
like
my brain is.
just on. It's about right about 60% to win.
Yeah, I was going the wrong way. I don't
Yeah, I
feel
don't know
well.
how you went the wrong way there, but I can tell.
I was like saying it, and I'm like, what am I doing? This isn't so. Yeah, the opposite way of what I was saying before.
Yeah.
Okay, directionally accurate as always. Yeah. So again,
Literally the opposite of directly accurate, actually. Like,
I was literally doing the math right, but go the wrong way. So we're gonna move on and pretend like that never happened. A good start. I need sleep. I feel like crap, but I'm not gonna. We're still gonna have a great show here. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, but the point of everything here is that there is not that, and again, like that, not that big. It's not that big of a favorite. Minus 170 is nothing. I haven't looked through. Talked to Jay earlier. He was really, really trying to have puck luck ready for today. Kind of on a new look and everything. I'm gonna just wait till tomorrow for any of the money lines and stuff. I can't imagine they're gonna move in such a strong direction that's gonna matter. Let's just wait for tomorrow on that. We'll quickly just run through a couple of the fun things. Goal score. Again, this was the first thing I pulled up. Kind of give the slate a little look. Just no one's really all that likely to score in St. Louis. They make it seem. I do think the lineups are kind of a mess. It's really hard to suss out. It does feel kind of like a pick your poison. Um, is there anything that stood out from you from a goal scorer perspective in any of these games? I guess before we kind of get into more of the stuff we're actually interested in.
Um, I mean, goal scoring is never where I'm really looking first and foremost because again, it's just you can't bet the other side of those goal scoring
Yeah,
odds. So like outside of very rare circumstances, I just don't think you're getting a good. I don't think you're getting your money in good on those bets. So I tend to look more at the shots and the point props just because they're tethered to the fact that the books tend to offer both higher or both the over and under on those. So like that's where my brain that's where I go primarily, I guess
yep.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, in this first game, I feel like we're gonna look back on the first few games in Seattle and just kick ourselves for not finding the right piece. They are still really running three lines here. It's the power plays, as I was saying before you joined, it's like on one hand you would say, well, McCann's on this unit. That unit's number one. It's Beniers as well. But then the other unit has Bjorkstrand and Montour. And it kind of feels like we're doing the same thing again, where it doesn't feel like we have a cohesive number one power play, maybe even less so. And they really have three lines that I like. I don't know which line I actually want to target because I think the player on them would be McCann. He's a little bit banged up. It sounds like he's fine to go. I saw the day-to-day tag. It's probably nothing.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's only there because he was a late scratch from that preseason game. I really
Yeah.
don't think that's
I
meaningful.
mean,
Like
practice
every
in
hockey
full.
player
So,
is somewhat hurt, always.
so then you go to the other side and you think, well, this is not really a great matchup on paper at the very least. We talked about it. Seattle was actually decent last year defensively. They just weren't good at moving the puck. They weren't good at generating enough offense, and McCann didn't score 40 goals. So when all those things happen pretty abruptly, you're going to struggle, and that's just the way it is. I don't know if this is the game I want to target as much for shots, but I feel like there's got to be something here that I'm just like,
Yeah,
I feel like it's Cairo, but I just don't know.
on 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 Underdog, I think the line for Brandon Montour was 2.0 shots. I don't does he have a DK price?
Plus 132.5.
Plus 132.5. Okay, so yeah, the technically it's a slightly better bet on Underdogs. I think the line there is plus 137 on the 2.0.
Thought it was 132.
Um,
It's fine.
that one was mildly interesting to me just because this is a guy who will get involved offensively, and it's not like you could argue that in Florida he might even be less likely to get involved offensively because of the fact that they had so much talent on that top power play. Like, a Brandon Montour shot from the point's probably not your best bet. There's not as much talent in Seattle, and he's liable to jump in the play and whatnot. So I kind of think that that's a decent bet on just sort of like, here's a guy who they signed to be their big ticket defenseman. Obviously, he's going to split that power play time with Vince Dunn. You're not going to see one unit get 75% of the run. So I don't really care which unit he's on. Like, again, I don't think that Jared McCann is like a can't miss. Like, I gotta get that unit, this exposure in my bets or whatever. So yeah, that's a long way to say I kind of like Brandon Montour. I noticed that one earlier.
Yeah. I'm gonna give it another look tomorrow. I just, as of right now, just nothing stood out in this game. I do think this game is like it's kind of one of those situations where there's so much on the DraftKings slate as far as not the sports book, but the actual DFS that's cheap and feels like it could just get there on one shot type of situation where I do want to talk about it more there. I didn't see anything that really stood out. There's a couple bets I was kind of hoping to get to that just either don't exist or didn't really get me I guess off the ground as far as what they are right now, as far as the odds, the points in this game. So again, like I think you could go so many different directions. I don't know if there's one that I'm absolutely giga smashing. I was really thinking about just clicking on like a Yanni Gord under with like I just who's the other player though? It's like everyone else kind of feels like they could be in a spot that could conceivably not be bad. I just don't know.
I just looked at Utah's decor without John Marino, and I just gagged a little bit. I did not realize it was
We're
this bad.
we're
So
gonna
I'm
we're
sorry,
gonna
I was
get
not
there.
listening.
No, I'm just saying like I feel like this game could be boring in general.
Yeah, for
If
sure.
it's going to be boring, I would
Oh,
love to do
yeah,
a
I
something
mean,
where I have like Yanni Gord under and another player under, and I can't pick another
yeah.
player.
I mean, yeah, the problem is that you're always being offered like guys who are technically in better roles. I think generally speaking that I'm okay to move on from that game. Like Brandon Montour
Yeah,
move on is like my
yeah,
official
I,
thing because yeah, I,
yeah.
I don't care. too much. And I do want to get into the DFS very shortly because I have my thing set up, and I'll talk a little bit about what I want to sort of walk through for these first couple weeks of podcasts and whatnot.
We can sprint through the rest. Just find stuff that we like.
Yeah. Boston is very similar to St. Louis and Seattle for the most part in that they don't really have many attractive pieces. Obviously, Pastrnak is a world above what either of those two teams have to offer. I'm low-key interested in Charlie McAvoy. I'm not sure what's his current point prop listed at. Plus money for McAvoy. Yeah. He was just fairly good at putting up points, relative to the rest of the league last year. He just didn't. One, I think he got hurt for a little bit, and two, he just didn't really, I think, get the secondary assists that you would expect a power play defenseman to get. I'll need to do a deeper dive into his numbers, but I index on primary points, and his numbers look better than any defenseman outside of Vince Dunn as far as D-men putting up points last year. And so plus money alongside Pastrnak, that just feels pretty solid. I'm just reading Brett's comments.
I fixed it.
Yeah, Brett, I know you know this, but come back here in a month and it'll be $50 the first.
I don't know. I haven't done honestly, and it's funny because I feel like normally before we podcast, I'm just jamming through all the bets, but I have 40 tickets. So all I've been doing is the daily fantasy all day. And I'm looking at this board and I'm like, I looked at it and I don't remember some of this.
Again, I want to talk about this when we get to the actual podcast part. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but this is literally the first time you've been more prepared for a DFS slate and I've been more prepared for the betting slate, I think. Yeah.
I think that let's just get to the one bet that I think we both absolutely agree on is the Philip Kurashev under. I don't care that he's with Bertuzzi and Taylor Hall. He's not with top power play. He's not with Connor Bedard. So I just don't care. I think that's unequivocally the best bet on the board. I definitely think it's probably just mispriced enough to where if it's offered on Underdog, I'd include it in your slips. I think conversely, you could convince me that Teravainen is fine at plus 110. I do worry about him as a player enough that I'm not sure if I'm saying that's anywhere near a jam. I hate the fact they moved Mikheyev on that top line out of absolutely nowhere. Just stupid nonsense. But what are you going to do? And other than that, I don't know. I don't think there's anything in this game that the Barrett Hayton over is probably the one I'm going to convince myself of. But that I think these two are better than anything else we've looked at so far.
I think if I were to pick between Teravainen and Hayton, I would side with Teravainen. I think there's a higher floor just raw talent wise with Teravainen. I would take Hayton in more of the same game parlay type nonsense where you're just jamming together Schmaltz, Keller, and Hayton versus I wouldn't do the same thing with Bedard and Teravainen and Mikheyev, or even just Bedard and Teravainen. I just feel like there's less certainty there of the unit sticking that they were all game and whatnot. That's a very minor distinction, of course. I think the guy that we're going to talk about for DFS and whatnot is Dylan Guenther. He should be, I think, very similarly priced to Nick Schmaltz, if not Clayton Keller, and that's just not the way that it looks right now. So I'm going to have the board covered as far as shot ladders, and the points 1 and 2 points. I have access now to what you're looking at here. I didn't have that before as far as the laddering and the same game parlays with the shots and point prop involved. So I'm still figuring that stuff out. But generally speaking, my approach for these bets are, especially early in the season, is to just find players who I think are generally undervalued because they're either ascending into a role or undervalued because they're or overvalued because they are sort of falling from their previous role, be it age or team transfer or something of the sort. Because I frankly don't think the sports books and who they outsource their odds shopping to are doing much beyond just the basic historical odds creation process. And so I think that sort of capitalizing on these situations early is going to be the edge. So Gunther's a perfect example of this, where I think it's very reasonable that he should be priced exactly the same as Nick Schmaltz, and he's not. He's 30 points better as far as minus 130 versus minus 160. That'll obviously flow through to the plus 2 points to the shots. Just those sorts of things. I think we have a edge in, and so I'm just going to try and set it up so that like I profit a little bit if he does what I expect him to, but I also layer in that upside if he's if he's really having a great game. And obviously DFS, that upside is what you're chasing as well. So those will be very correlated. So I'll just sort of end this segment saying thank you for the handful of people who stuck around. Hopefully you got enough out of this. It's just sort of whet your appetite to think about opening night. I do want to transition into what I will officially cut and put up on the podcast feed, which is a more traditional game-by-game DFS breakdown. But DJ, anything else you want to say before we kind of get into like the official opening of the season here?
No, just again, I do think that the one last note on all that betting talk is not only can you parlay like the Teravainen and Bedard for a point, which we said was like power play line correlated, but if you add Kurashev under to that, it actually gets boosted quite a bit.
Okay.
And I do think that's where the books are missing quite a bit. But you can't do the like you're saying the laddered bets doesn't seem to want to work within that.
I don't mean
some
laddered.
Sorry. Well, yeah, but
maybe I'm not using the term laddered properly. I'm honestly not sure. I just meant like I can see it now on my page. I've never seen this before. Maybe it's new to everyone. But like Dylan Gunther, I think Gunther, but other guys I can bet plus 2 shots, plus 3 shots, plus 4 shots, plus 5 shots, and I can't bet the under on any of those. But when you compare that to the over-unders beneath it, they look pretty similar. So like I don't think I'm getting totally screwed on the one side bets. So I'm gonna just put like maybe half of what I would have put on over 2.5 on 2.5, and then put like a quarter on over 3.5, and 3 or 4 plus shots, and I'll put like an eighth on the and so on down the line, so that I'm just capturing what they're offering. And also giving myself a path to more upside than just the basic, if he hits over 2.5, I win, whatever, minus 130, my money back plus a little bit. That's all I mean by that.
Okay. All right. You want to share your screen then?
Yeah. Well, let's just, I'll share my screen when we get into the game by game stuff, but just want to intro and sort of recap what we're doing here and get the podcast season started. So again, thank you to everyone who hung out for that little intermission there. We will certainly be better prepared to get things going more immediately next time. And also thank you, DJ, for trying to do an underdog draft. That was a great idea. Just unfortunate that the lobbies did not fill. So with all that said, here we go. Hello and welcome to the Morningscape podcast. I am Matt Moody, and I'm joined by DJ Mitchell here for a very special episode. It is opening day in North America. DJ, how you doing on the eve of the true NHL season?
I'm good. I actually thought Doug Leby this weekend, so he popped in Saturday. So I couldn't even be more prepared or better off as a person. He exists. He's real, and I ran into him in just a very odd way of just like us realizing we're both in the same city, which was great. So yeah, and I feel like I spent a good chunk of my day trying to make as many lineups as possible, and I'm not even halfway done because preseason went pretty well, and I have 40 tickets.
40 tickets to the $5 over on DraftKings that we will be discussing in great detail, seeing as it's only a 3-game slate. Just a couple of housekeeping notes, because I'm sure most people are getting back in the swing of things. You might not notice that the slate starts at 4:30 Eastern time on Tuesday. So, make sure that if you're working or whatever, like DJ, that you're getting your lineups done at lunch or whatever well in advance, because you're not going to have your normal, 5 to 7 o'clock window post working hours for most people to build your lineups. That's not a big deal for most of you, but hopefully for at least one of you, this helps you, saves you from the last minute scramble when you get the alert. Hey, this starts in 15 minutes. You haven't built any of your lineups. So that's certainly very important. It's unique to this slate in that, things are going to be sequential versus normal. We'll talk about that. And then secondly, I just want to reiterate that although this is primarily a podcast, we will be doing video for most episodes this year. I'm not sure, how much, but we're just trying to, offer the people what they want and also integrate YouTube into our existence, because that's a avenue that other people have done successfully, and hopefully can sort of expand our reach beyond what we historically have. So as far as what we are actually doing here, I did post a poll in the Discord, just checking in, how do people feel about the podcast format? On this slate, it's less important, of course, but the overwhelming result did say that the game-by-game format was preferred to the position-by-position as far as breaking down the DraftKings slates. So with that in mind, we will be going game-by-game through the Tuesday, October 8th daily fantasy slate. DJ, are you ready to get this thing rocking?
Yep. I just will mention as well that we did 35 minutes of show before we started. Well, not 30, like 30 minutes of betting and some underdog talk. So if you're interested in that as well and you want to check out the YouTube channel, we're like 200 followers away from being able to like maybe make a single nickel. So if you just want to subscribe, it's only this. I don't post like I'm not posting like random videos. Like it's just hockey stuff. So definitely give that a subscribe if you have YouTube. And if you don't have YouTube, that'd be weird. So cool.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, generally speaking, we are pretty locked into this $5 contest. Right now I have, I think, 25 entries just via tickets and whatever I decided to join. I might get that up to like 40 or 50. I don't think I don't have any ambition to use an optimizer or anything for this. So like, I don't think I'll get to 150, even if there's overlay. So that's what we are going to be focused on. Though do keep in mind that there is a 333 that is 20K to first, 60K prize pool. That's pretty standard for your typical Tuesday, Thursday NHL slate. There's also a $33.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a $33 that's 10K to first that is pretty ambitious. We don't often see this price range. So if this is a price range that works for you, I do encourage you to scroll down in the lobby a bit and look for it. There could even be overlay because, again, it's pretty abnormal. And obviously a lot of the attention will be on the $5 contest. So with that in mind, with a 3-game slate with, a $150,000 total prize pool contest, 35,000 entries, not considering possible overlay. You're going to need to have almost the perfect team to win this tournament on Tuesday night. And I will say, DJ here has been absolutely grinding the lineups. Meanwhile, I hadn't even opened the DFS slate until, 30 minutes ago. So this might be the first time in Win Escape podcast history that I was more prepared to talk about betting stuff, which we did in the prelude to this over on YouTube if you want to check that out. And DJ is actually more prepared to talk about the lineup building process. So just want to take a moment, let that sink in, because I'm sure multiple people drove off the road in shock hearing that. But yes, DJ, what do you think about building lineups on this slate?
It kind of, I feel like there's like certain lineup nights that maybe other sports, and it's like everything kind of feel like it works. And if you think it doesn't work, you can almost force it to work. Now, of course, you have to be perfect. Like you said, it's a 3-game slate. But if you're just saying like, all right, like I'm making X amount of lineups and I want to get, like, I think the way I'm focused is there are these players that I think are either mispriced or I think will come under own comparatively what they should be. I'm going to be overexposed to this certain category of players. And then from there, I'm just going to build a lot of different combinations that are primarily power play one focused, because again, I just, sure, there's the perfect storm. And there's my favorite video of all time in YouTube history where you donkey smash, break your keyboard over your head, and just jam in Darnell Nurse and 5 Oilers. And like, of course, that could happen. Like, we can even discuss what that would look like, I think, in the vacuum of this slate. But in reality, this does, like, there's one player that's incredibly expensive, and then everything else is pretty easy. So I have kind of loved building, and I've done I think I'm at 19 of my 40 teams, and I have one player right now that's like 80%. And I don't know if I want to get that carried away, but we'll get into that.
We'll get into it for sure. Yeah, the other thing that's interesting is that, well, one, I guess, just to be clear, we're talking about three games: St. Louis at Seattle, Boston at Florida, and Chicago at Utah. Um, not three of the greatest games in NHL history for sure. You might have heard me say Chicago at Utah. What the hell are you talking about? Are you on drugs? Yeah, no, there is a team in Utah now that you know, yeah, that's pretty interesting, and something that we haven't really talked about, but we won't talk about the whole situation here. But it's just going to be an odd day because it starts at 4:30. Seattle's this afternoon game. We will know almost the entirety of the results from that game before Boston Florida starts, meaning you can late swap, if you really want to say, like, I don't even know who's going to be the chalkiest of chalk. Like, I'm imagining Florida, just, they're a pretty big favorite and they have that first power play unit that's really, really good. Like, I think they'll be the most chalky options. So, like, if you play, say you play St. Louis with Dylan Holloway and Robert Thomas and they get a combined 3 DraftKings points, maybe you pivot to Lindholm and Pasternak, like something like that. I don't know if that's exactly what will happen based on ownership and whatnot, so keep that in mind. But like, you will be able to make those changes that we really don't have much access to in normal slates because they usually start at 7 and go throughout the night until 10 o'clock. We're going to have a much longer period and almost perfect information before each step, before each interval of the slate begins. So do definitely keep your flex in mind. Do not put someone in the early game in your flex because you're probably going to want to at least review your lineups to see if any swaps are in order based on how your results are to this point.
I just really quickly want to read a text I got from my cousin. It was, "What's a UTA hockey club, Deej?" And then someone said, "Oh my God, I forgot Utah has a team now. How weird and fun is that?"
Yeah. Yeah, no, like, and I know a lot of the people listening to this are not part of like the normie culture, but maybe we can reach some of them. And so if you're over here like normally playing MLB and NBA and NFL, and you're like, oh, what's this overlay? Just that's the old Arizona Coyotes, the old Phoenix Coyotes,
Yep.
even, and the old Winnipeg Jets before that. So there you go. There's your history of the NHL in 5 seconds. Okay. So I think we can just get into the game by game stuff. I will work on possibly integrating salaries into my sheet here. I might be able to do that while I'm on air, while I'm live. But
I mean, honestly, I think it would be worthwhile to look at without salaries first, and then look at
yeah,
it. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of, in my opinion, that might even be better just to be like,
that's
wait,
fair.
that guy's could be wrong. Okay, yeah, you go.
So you'll recognize this if you paid attention. By the way, podcast people, I'm not going to rely on this as a visual crutch. Again, this is a podcast, but for the visual people, I just have a sheet up that I used for the NHL preseason. And I just, for this endeavor, I'm just going to do a tab for each team and just sort of keep their lines updated. And it basically is just very quickly summarizing how each player fares relative to their position, breaking apart defense and forwards based on their DraftKings points like per minute, their shot rate per minute, and then their primary points per minute. And then for rookies and for younger players, I also have included their minors data back to 2019. Be it, the KHL, the AHL, college, the WHL, whatever their most recent season of data is. For most of these guys, of course, it's the AHL. Just how they fared, how their stats in that league between shots and points translated to, players of a similar age indexed, so all these numbers are indexed around the average being 1, basically. So anyone above 1 is better than average. Anyone lower than that is worse than average. And then I also have some data about their age, their draft capital, because obviously, first rounders have more rope than non-first rounders, and if Corey Pronman had them ranked. So that's just what you're seeing on the screen here, and they'll just sort of be our guide as we go through team by team and talk about lines and power play units. So starting things off with St. Louis. Let's see, I can zoom in a little bit more, I believe. Yeah, I'm just going to cut off the Pronman rank because I don't really need to bring that up unless it's relevant. Starting things off with the St. Louis side, we did get some surprising news, just that the Kyrou Thomas connection is being broken up for the time being. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know you were a big Kyrou Thomas proponent. When you're building your lineups, are you seeing Buchnevich and Kyrou as just the same pairing, or does that sort of hurt your interest in the St. Louis team as a whole?
Yeah, no, I don't like it at all. I think it's the second stupidest thing on this 3-game slate, surprisingly, and yeah, it's incredibly. I really don't know what it does. Like what I think might happen here is it might convince people that Jake Neighbors is a better play. Maybe he is. I'm not saying he's wrong. It just, and I was ready to giga smash Justin Falk, and now it's like, how do I do it? In 40 teams, I'm gonna have a little bit of everything. I'm even gonna just do some Kyrou and Thomas, just to do some Kyrou and Thomas, and hope that maybe this is all a fever dream and it's just gonna come back together quickly. But I don't love this. It does help in one way. Like, keep in mind that Dylan Holloway, as you're kind of even showing here a little bit, like, he's not horrendous. And the fact that not only is he not horrendous, but he's on the second power play, at least makes him a bit more viable than just a clear throwaway. This is a guy they went out and got as an RFA and clearly want to try to put him in a position to succeed early. So yeah, and you're already pulling up his minimum salary, which is very true. Like, it does change, I guess, the one component of when you stack St. Louis now, it becomes, well, different is the easiest word, but not only just different, but like, I think it helps you afford other things. And I almost wonder if that boosts up the ownership of a guy like Robert Thomas, because now you can put him in with Jake Neighbors as a power play 1. You also get a minimum salary guy that I've already described could be in play here. And Justin Falk is, I think, definitely underpriced. So all of that comes together for me to just say, like, crap, like, are they going to be overowned, or are maybe like, I don't think I'm not fading it, but it's not something I'm going to be just like jamming like I thought I was.
Yeah, another consideration is that I want to say, was Holloway on the second power play? Do we know that? I don't have that.
Yes. Yeah, I retweeted
here.
it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't think Texier was. So, like, if you're talking about just choosing between the top 2 lines, which, of course, there's other options, I do think most of the interest is going to steer toward this top line, because I think Robert Thomas just has more cachet. Like, and, he might, the line 1 also might impact projections as well. And secondly, like, Holloway is a name. He had the whole RFA situation. Versus Texier has just sort of been around. He hasn't really
He
been.
is on the second power play.
So they both are? Okay.
Kapanen, Shen, Holloway, Texier, Broberg. That is the cheapest power play 2 that's ever existed, but
yeah, no, that's, yeah, okay. So where I think I'm going with that, though, is that I think Texier will be lower owned than Holloway. I think Buchnevich will be lower owned than Thomas. And Jordan Kyrou might be the best player on the team, just, I mean, especially from a DraftKings standpoint, he is.
Yeah.
And that's sort of having me interested in Pavel Buchnevich. So yeah, I guess I'd lightly side with the second line, but I would need to see better ownership projections to be confident in that. My sort of question is, are we positive that Seattle is actually a team to be feared defensively? Again, I'm not sure if the answer to that's yes or no.
Yeah, and first, before anyone asks, Busnevich is center on DraftKings,
Yes,
so
yes,
they do have
he
that correct. Which he has like
thankfully.
never played center,
Yeah.
but like the Blues again, I'm becoming very concerned that their coach could be bad. Not taking very long because this
Yeah.
is odd to just be like, you know what? Not only are we going to break up our most dynamic offensive weapons, from each other, which make each other better, we're also going to take a guy that's never played center at this level and at like 28 just convert him to our second line center. And then again, like sometimes when you see that, it can be a situation where there's guys to kind of take the draw, maybe take some of the defensive burden off. I don't think that's
Mhm.
Cairo. And I mean, you could maybe try to convince me Texier is good defensively. I just don't even know because he's never been a big role player on a team.
Yeah.
So yeah, it feels like an absolute head scratcher. It's leading me more away from this game than anything. And I know where you're kind of leading into, like how good is Seattle anyways. It's like, yeah, well, not great. Maybe not great defensively, maybe, but like it'll probably at least in that like 10 to 12 range, 10 to 15 range defensively. I'm not finding a ton here other than value, and there's other value spots. And I think the value in this game is going to kind of push people into it more than I think it's going to become like the best play. So I think I'm going to end up being underweight on this game in general, but I'll let you take the reins. You were going somewhere with this.
Yeah. Like, so it's very easy to say like, oh, well, Seattle's just a team that wants to shut the game down, and like that's, kind of fair based on how last year went for them. But they went out and they added Chandler Stevenson and Brandon Montour in the offseason. Two players who, love them or hate them, and especially at their contracts, it's very easy to find a case against them. I think do kind of skew offensively. Chandler Stevenson played with Mark Stone, so it's very tough to look at his numbers and say that he's, bad defensively, but also he played with Mark Stone. He's not playing with Mark Stone anymore. Jaden Schwartz and Andrei Burakovsky are not ripping off their masks and unveiling a Mark Stone defensive wizard, uh, you know, uh, underlying propensity at all. So I kind of am wondering if like this is not just a spot to be like, you know what, like the Seattle team is looking kind of fun. The prices are really low, pretty much across the board. Outside of maybe Bjorkstrand feels a touch high, but like if you told me in a month that all of these players were more expensive than they are right now, I don't think I would be overly surprised. And then on the St. Louis side, obviously they have such a concentrated offensive output between Kyrou, Buchnevich, Thomas. Neighbors was very good last year, but your thoughts on him aside. And Justin Falk is a very good, player for daily fantasy, and he's 4,600. Like he is probably the best point per dollar D man on the slate. I think there's a lot to like here, just from a like, look back on this game in a month relative to the slate that we're on that we'll dive into. Like, I do think this game has a decent amount of hidden upside because of the changes that Seattle has made that I think make them more likely to skew offensive than in past years under different coaching. And then also their third line with Shane Wright. We haven't seen Shane Wright in the NHL for more than 5 games, so we don't have much of a sample. But he sure profiles as a guy who raises the offensive capability of a team with very little to say about his defensive prowess. So like, yeah, Seattle will probably be fine, but I do think this is a good bet to make that like just in general, this game is higher tempo. So on the Seattle side, they have 3 lines that you could very well argue that like you should just be um, like stacking the 3 lines individually of one another. So like, do you have any thoughts on what you're doing with the lineup here?
Um, I mean, the most I have of any player in this game at all is Shane Wright right now. Actually, I have
Okay.
him tied with Kyrou and Falk, but I I'm not that interested in the second line. I actually think Burakovsky is going to be the guy that I'm going to end up with a lot more of than I initially thought. He is on one of the 2 top power plays at 3,200, and I feel like the guy that is going to get forgotten about the most, just because it feels unnecessary and it feels like there's other guys that are like we've already named 2 $2,500 players that make sense, and there's more to come. So I don't think he's going to be jammed. I don't think that line's going to get jammed much. Um, I had like a him and Vince Dunn situation where it feels like that's like going to be one of the lowest pairs in ownership, which are power play correlated. And again, on a power play that is going to be Beniers and it's going to be McCann. So it's sort of like, why not, get a little bit on that? Other than that, yeah, I mean, I could see myself playing a bit of Wright and Bjorkstrand together and Montour for that. So I have one McCann team right now. I might get that up to like 3 just because, again, it almost feels like on the other end of the spectrum, 6,200 feels like kind of a lot to pay for him. When in reality, 2 years ago, we would have been foaming at the mouth. Jared McCann, 6,200 top power, like guy's a 40 goal scorer, fell off a cliff.
Yeah, I kind of think you can throw salary out the window on this slate. Like,
yeah,
is obviously the smaller fields you get into, I guess the more it'll matter, but like you're really just looking for court. Like if you're trying to play David Pastrnak, Matthew Tkachuk, and Connor Bedard, you're probably not playing a Seattle stack anyway. Like you're just not finding enough correlation there to make it work.
Yep.
So like I really don't think that 6,200 is that worthy of, on a 10 game slate. Obviously I might feel differently, but like ultimately I think the question comes down to is, can he score 25 tonight, or is that just not on the table? And I think that certainly is on the table for him. So I think he's in consideration. Yeah. Are you looking at their power plays?
I could pull them right back up because I just had them up. The other thing is, we were asked about goaltender for this game. It was not said. They asked Bilesma, and he basically said, "Oh, I actually love both of our goalies, and I'm going to play them both at times." And it's like, shut up. Just shut up. Just don't even say words. It was Dunn, McCann, Eberle, Burakovsky, Beniers, and then Montour, Bjorkstrand, Wright, Stevenson, and Schwartz. So again, that all leads me back to the whole point of like why I think no one's going to be playing Burakovsky really at all.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a guy that like when they signed him, people were like, holy crap. Like they may have just gotten a line one winger, a guy that's won cups, the guy that's, been integral in scoring and like now he has like just injuries have derailed him and maybe he's bad, but like that doesn't make me think he's all that bad. They kind of have him on the opposite side of McCann from what it looked like. Kind of feels like a spot they might put a guy that shoots the puck. So
yes,
I don't know. I feel like he's a bit of the guy that I want to end up getting to. Again, like I'm saying, I'm building 40 teams. I'd love him to be at least 20 to 25% kind of like scattered because I think he's going to end up being what do you think his ownership's going to be? 6, 7?
Burakovsky, the power play one is particularly interesting. I'm just looking through the rest of the slate to see if there's anyone even arguably power play one that's close to him. Teravainen is 3,900, and Hayton is
Barrett Hayton's center, but like
Hayton is going to be very popular. That is for sure.
Yes.
Just given the line mates and the power play. I don't think I think you're right. Burakovsky maybe tops out at 8 to 10 at absolute max because again, salary is not that important and like he's not a clean correlation with his actual 5-on-5 line mates and Schwartz and Stevenson. Yeah, there's a lot to like about Burakovsky. Obviously, there's more than just last year's data, but based on last year's data, his shot rate was pretty strong, about the same as Jared McCann on a per minute basis. And when you're talking about their setup, the big surprise I think to me is that Matthew Beniers is their net front grinder. Like, maybe he bumps out to the slot and Eberle's more of the net front guy from time to time. But like Burakovsky's on the flank with McCann and Vince Dunn. I think playing those three together as a bet on the power play is perfectly fine. Just sort of skipping the low floor of Matty Beniers and the sort of lesser involvement of Jordan Eberle, just as a way to conserve wing slots and get a little different. I like that as a GPP strategy.
Yep.
But I also like going to these depth lines into power play too, because again, this team is not going to run 75% of their minutes to one power play unit. Like I think we have to assume that's the case until we see it happen, that they're going to concentrate their offense in one power play. And the names on their second unit I think I like more than the names on their first unit. Jaden Schwartz, Chandler Stevenson, Brandon Montour, Shane Wright, Oliver Bjorkstrand. I really like that they priced up Shane Wright to 4,300 here because, we just talked about Barrett Hayton. Like, I think Shane Wright gets completely lost.
Yep.
And this is a guy with serious, serious prospect pedigree. He was obviously not the first overall pick in his draft, but he was in consideration for it. He dating back to I think it was whatever league he was in the CHL. He got exceptional player status. That's very rare given to the guys like McDavid and Tavares and whatnot. And he didn't quite live up to it. But his last couple of years in the AHL, or last year in the AHL, and then his final year in the CHL, he not only sort of took on the mantle of being their best player and their most talented player, but also of being like a 200-foot player that Dan Bylsma, I'm pretty sure, loves the kid. And so that makes me feel really good about buying in early, especially when pricing is not just going to funnel the projection donkeys to the same play. Spending almost 10K for Wright and Bjorkstrand on the third line in power play 2 doesn't feel great. But if you told me those two finished the year leading the team in scoring this season, I don't know, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd be like a 4 level surprised versus if I told you, hey, Ryan McLeod and Jason Zucker are going to be 1 and 2 on the Sabres in scoring this year. You might be like, well, they only scored 10 goals all year. But you would be like, holy shit, what happened to, what happened to Tage? What happened to all these other guys? I just don't think that's the case for Seattle this year. So yeah, I guess all that to say, I like the depth in Seattle a whole lot, and I love the sort of spending up to be contrarian by playing, Shane Wright, Bjorkstrand, and Montour in a GPP.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm not saying you couldn't. I guess what I would say is I wouldn't just play Shane Wright by himself. Maybe, it does not say you couldn't do it, but I do think if you're making this bet, I think you just pile on it. I agree. I think it's not, you always have to be all three of them, but I definitely agree with that sort of general consensus on getting three guys that absolutely have slate breaking upside and have shown it. And while Shane Wright in small doses, it's not like this is a 7th round pick out of nowhere. This is a guy that was highly regarded and slipped due to injuries and whatnot to the 4th overall pick, which everyone was shocked by. And but we can move on to this.
He was the 26th best prospect rated by Corey Pronman, just for you, people who care about that sort of thing. So that's certainly a player, in a very high tier. Now, to be fair, Matty Beniers is ranked 9th by Pronman. I've long been a sort of anti-Beniers guy, but people are very, very mixed on Beniers. I kind of look at his shitty rates from last year. And I look at his college numbers and I'm just like, yeah, I don't see much of a fantasy player here. But other people, you dig into some of his advanced passing metrics and whatnot, and they see a guy who profiles as an elite passer. I just don't think he's that talented myself, but I don't know, DJ, will you fall on that? Because if Matty Beniers is the 9th best prospect in the NHL, this is the year he goes nuts. Obviously Jared McCann is going to nuke. And any quick thoughts on Matty Beniers, on a long-term sense?
No, I mean, I think you summed it up nicely, really just right there by saying if you're betting on McCann on this slate I think the point is if you look at last year, both of these guys are priced either correctly or honestly McCann could be overpriced. But number one, as we are going to say, I think 900 times, it doesn't matter that much what the pricing is. But number two is if you actually do believe in him as a player and a prospect in Beniers, it's going to elevate both of them to a point where this could be laughable, these prices. But I think all of this kind of comes together nicely for me and the way I'm building on this slate, which is I think number one is that Bjorkstrand is probably the more lethal player in general as an all-around offensive weapon. The fact that they put him with Shane Wright and Tolvanen kind of makes me think that line's one they really want to put in offensive situations rather than defensive. You would not say the same for Chandler Stevenson. You would maybe not say the name for Eberle and Beniers, but I think you could definitely say that the Gord line and the Stevenson line will be ones that they'll prefer to get out there at home against Kyrou and Thomas. Whereas the problem in St. Louis that everyone's been harping on all offseason is as depth goes, it's really bad. And even the players they went out and got, don't think make it all that much better. They basically traded nothing to get like 4 of these guys because they just weren't necessary on the teams they were on previously. And
Mhm.
I'm not saying they're all bad, or I honestly think it was a nice bit of work to be entirely honest, to put something together that's at least
Yeah.
usable, but it's nothing that I'm scared of attacking. And like I do think Shane Wright will get opportunity with these 2 guys. And you know, it only takes 2 goals and you're taking a slate, by the
Yes.
balls.
Yes, it's a double-edged sword, of course, because Yanni Gord, Brandon Tanev certainly profiles as a shutdown line. So, like, that means you're going to get soft underbelly minutes. You're also going to lose out on minutes where other teams are playing their fourth line for 7 minutes a night. Seattle certainly will look to get their fourth line out there for 15 minutes. So don't be surprised,
Yeah,
when you see that your players, even if they're Jared McCann and Matty Beniers, only play 16, 17 minutes in this game. Certainly a very worthy thing if
that
you're
was
trying to project out. But all right, that's I
and
think
wait,
really good.
I guess as we're moving on here, it's like we just spent way too much time probably you'd think on a game that is I think the lowest total and all, but like the other games aren't as hard to figure out at
Yeah.
all. So
Yep.
I don't think they're going to take as long.
No, 100%. Totally agree with you there. I'm just trying to see if I can take all these changes I made to make this look pretty and quickly port them over to the rest of these teams. So let's get
You
over
said it,
to
W for Wumbo.
yeah, exactly. Let's get over to Boston. They're taking on Florida. As of recording, there's zero indication that the hurricane is going to lead to a postponement here. But of course, things change quick. If the hurricane changes course or something, keep an eye out because obviously a afternoon postponement on top of this 3 game slate would just throw into complete chaos. So just make sure you're checking in on that. Again, it's very unlikely given how the storm is tracking. Basically, it's going to cut through Florida way north of Miami. So like it's going to go through Tampa and north up maybe almost up to Jacksonville. So there's just no real reason to suspect that this game will get called for any reason. But it's at least a possibility. So with that in mind, at 7 o'clock, we have Boston and Florida. Starting things off with Boston as a pretty significant underdog. Their 2 main acquisitions this offseason were Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov. They, of course, shipped out Linus Ullmark to acquire basically nothing and Jonas Corposalo, so basically nothing. And because Jeremy Swayman just signed his contract, we also don't know the starting goalie in this game. We thought it was going to be uh, Corposalo, and then they were just kind of like, yeah, it might actually be Swayman. So stay tuned. We don't know. But what are your thoughts from a high level on their offseason and how they're going to fare against Florida here?
I mean, I think the narrative bros will be out in droves looking at the cup raising of the banner versus the blah 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 and the blah blah blahs. But I mean, yeah, I'm stacking Pasternak in lineups. That's surely going to happen. I'm not as interested in um, any of this depth in Boston. I definitely could see the scenario where you try to convince yourself to play Marchand at like 0%, but I'm just not buying it. And I know, Morgan Geeky and Charlie Coyle scored goals last year, and Marchand and Bob, I just not doing it. Like I think I'm just going to end up overweight on pasta and underweight on the majority of the rest of this game. I'm somewhat interested in Mason Lohrei. He's a good prospect. It doesn't feel like it's entirely necessary, but defense is a spot that I don't think many people are going to punt off, just because other positions feel easier. And he definitely has a propensity to shoot and a propensity to get points. And I think that on that second unit, arguably, I guess, because it's hard to know, I could see him at least being a factor offensively. So, yeah, I'm not going to have a ton of Boston, but I will have a good bit of Pasternak.
Yeah, I want to say we saw power plays somewhat recently that
You
had
you got him.
lower.
Well, he was two.
Yeah,
It was
Lowry,
Lohrei,
Frederick,
Geeky,
Boyle.
Coyle, Frederick.
Yeah, I'm not seeing geeky on it from the third, but that certainly could not be
8 hours
accurate.
ago, Lohrei, Geeky,
Oh,
Coyle,
okay,
Frederick,
perfect.
Brezzo.
All right, I must have scrolled right by that one. Okay.
You really prepared well for this.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you that. Yeah, I literally told you this.
Because it wasn't Lindholm. Remember when people thought Hampus Lindholm was going to come to Boston and get like 90 points?
Because he did. He came and
Okay,
he was
well,
just like, "Hey, this first power play job is mine now, right?" And they're like, sure."
no one else was using it, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I mean, I just wonder. I guess the way to put this is, if you, let's just say, for example, you're building a lineup and you started by saying, "I'm not playing David Pastrnak." You can play anything you really want. It gets really easy, and I think a lot of people are just going to allow themselves to take the easy way out and build their 4-2-2s or 3-3-2s, and they're just going to ignore Pastrnak to a larger extent than I think should happen. Because I just don't think it's all that close. Like, I think he's the best player on the slate, and the matchup is minorly concerning, but I think we're going to show you in just one more slide that Florida could be a bit worse than maybe. And like, people just seem to be like, oh, well, I'm really right back in it. And like, I'm sure they're going to make the playoffs, and I'm sure they're going to win a lot of games, but we're only playing one game. It's one night. It's just tomorrow.
And the main problem with that idea, though, is that, theoretically where Florida could be had is, in their depth, particularly on defense, because I still think their forward units are, really solid.
Yeah.
Their top nine. But, Boston really only has this one line that you're scared of. So, like, yes, the Marchand Coyle Geeky unit does have some level of intrigue, but they're not incredibly cheap and at the same cost as any of the Seattle lines and any of the St. Louis lines, and we'll get to Chicago and Utah. Like, I just don't think at cost they're all that interesting, because I just don't think the dynamicness, the dynamism that I want out of my stacks here. So pretty much top liner bust. Zaka's the player I would leave off, of course, if doing two man. But yeah, is Zaka properly listed as a wing here? Yes, he is. Okay, perfect.
Yep, he is. Yep.
So yeah, gotta say, even DK was more prepared for the slate than I was. It's crazy.
I was actually very shocked by. I think most of what, I mean, there's a couple of things that we're going to mention very quickly here, but other than a couple of things, I thought DraftKings actually did a pretty good job pricing and putting everything correctly. So it's 2 points to them.
Yeah. Mason Lohrei is a very good depth option. I know you mentioned him before. Just want to point out that when you look at his per minute stats on a DK points per minute, he looks very similar to McAvoy. And yes, the Zadorov and Andrew Peak unit could, shave off some of his minutes, just from a, like, okay, he's not going to be the true second pairing guy like a Bo Byram or whatever. Just imagine playing, 25 minutes, but he's listed on the second pair. That's not really going to happen for Lohrei. But between Lohrei and Andrew Peak, depends on what you're looking for. Both of these guys are among the cheap options on the slate, and I think we'll draw some ownership, so like you're not getting them at 1%, but I don't think it'll really matter if they're 9, 10, 11% owned here.
Yep. Yeah.
Anything else you want to say
about
about
Boston?
options
at forward to punt? No, I'm just saying a lot of options at forward to punt, not quite as many at defense, and Lohrei will get a little bit, but not as much. Let's move over to Florida, because a couple notes on them, and it's like you're alluding to. I agree. Like, their top three lines are great. The top line with Barkov, Verhaeghe, and Reinhart, all power play correlated. It's incredibly expensive. I'll definitely get some exposure to it, just because I think that people will avoid playing all three of them. And I think that what makes it almost even more powerful is, yes, of course, you could take a peek and say, well, the top power play guy is Adam Boqvist, who we've been champions for before. And not only has he rewarded us in the past by scoring goals, but that was back when he got 22 minutes a night. And now I just don't know how much run he's really going to get. So you can kind of ignore that defense spot. And I do think, as we just kind of mentioned, when you're building that stack, you could come back with a Mason Lohrei, who might get more minutes now because they're trailing. And you can kind of say, like, this is a nice, easy way to maybe get a little bit different than the field, who wouldn't think to do something like that. But in reality, if Mason Lohrei is getting that 20 minutes a night, it's in a game they're trailing and they need offense. So maybe a good way to bring it back. I don't think it's possible to play all three of them and Pastrnak. I'm pretty sure tried it and it was impossible no matter what I did in that. But you don't necessarily have to do that. Matt the Chuck will also garner ownership. He's just a very good player and a big game. And unfortunately for his line mates, they're not in the top power play.
Yeah. And we saw what Evan Rodriguez did in the playoffs last year. I don't think that's priced in here at just 4,100. He's a guy, when he's on the ice, he's going to chuck. And Matthew Tkachuk is a pretty good playmaker in addition to his, high personal usage as well, shots wise. So, yeah, the second line here makes a lot of sense. I'm not particularly intrigued by the matchup with presumably the Coyle Marchand Geeky line. But it is worth pointing out that this Lindell Luostarinen duo was viewed as sort of their shutdown line in the playoffs. Like, obviously, Barkov is a shutdown player, but like Lindell and Luostarinen were literally used as, shutdown guys. So it's at least possible that the Sam Bennett and that line gets matched up with these, bums and Frederick Brazo and Max Jones, or even Beecher Kessler Kepke in their 6 minutes that they get in this game. So I think there's a little bit more than what meets the eye. Just thinking about spending 16K on, well, more than 16, spending 17, 18K on the second line for Florida. Like, I do think Edvin Rodriguez makes sense in a vacuum. And I do think there's a lot of outs to them, like getting a pretty juicy matchup just because of the continued emergence of Anton Lundell. With that in mind, Lundell and Luostarinen are pretty cheap for, I think, how I think of them as players. Luostarinen I think is a few years older than Lundell, but Lundell is still 21, 22-ish. Maybe he just turned 23, but like, these are still players that I think have a little bit more to grow in their game. And so getting a 7K combo of just those two, I wouldn't play Samoskevich. He profiles fine based on his historical rates, but we saw it when he dressed last year. It's very possible he plays like 8 minutes in this game. Like, just not something I want to buy into when I'm already getting 2,900 Luostarinen. But I do think that sort of vomit mini stack is a really good way to save money for your Bedard, Pasternak type builds.
Yeah. I will mention that they did run power plays, and their power play 2 was Lindell, Bennett, Rodriguez, Ekblad, and Belinskis.
Yep.
Belinskis also with Mikola, and it wasn't Kulikov, which I guess we'll see tomorrow if that holds true. But seems interesting.
You mean Forsling, right? Or no, sorry, not what I just did. You mean it wasn't Forsling on the second unit?
No, that too.
Yeah. Okay.
That is also a point to make, is that Forsling wasn't on either unit, which didn't make me feel good.
No, it's certainly time to feel bad about the Forsling best ball exposure, with Adam Boqvist seemingly making the team in a decent role, and then Ekblad keeping his power play 2 job. I do wonder if the Belinskis was not just a placeholder for Forsling, because obviously Forsling is very useful on the PK as well. So, like, did they want to get Forsling PK reps? I don't know. But yeah, Forsling is, I think, a really thin bet on this slate, even with the power play 2 time that could come. I much prefer the angle of, like, if I'm taking a non-line 1 power play 1 Florida guy, I much prefer the angle of like Lindell, Luostarinen, save a bunch of money, get guys who probably are on the ice for empty net situations, and just move on, because it's pretty gross. I'm not paying 4,700 for Forsling when Justin Falk is there at 4,600.
Yep, all of this is true. We can move on to the final game, and then we'll finish with the normal stuff. And spending an hour and 30 minutes on this slate is truly what I'll be doing. Not all of this in the podcast, of course. I mean, like I said, the second dumbest thing that was done by any coach on this slate was the nonsense of breaking up the Thomas Kyrou line. But the dumbest is just out of absolutely nowhere moving Mikheyev up to the first line with Bedard and Teravainen. We've tried this before with Mikheyev and Pettersson. It didn't work. Chicago said maybe we can fix him. I guess why not? What do dumb teams do but be dumb? Um, it certainly hurt the way of building around Bedard, but I'm hoping that it'll hurt building around Bedard for others. And I will just build around Bedard regardless because I think he is the best center on the slate. He's not priced the way he should be for where I think he could get to. And again, I just think that people might throw their hands there, at least I hope. And also, I mean, again, listening to 32 Thoughts today, what am I hearing other than Elliot Friedman saying that Utah's going to make the playoffs? And like, I think that sentiment is felt throughout much of the community. I think people are rightly so excited to play them in daily fantasy, but we've already talked about quite a few options that are really good. And you're going to make a cut somewhere, and I'm not making that cut on Connor Bedard.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There is a very real chance that Bedard just breaks out and becomes a true, 90-point player. And Connor Bedard scoring 90 points does not come through 25 goals and 65 assists. It comes through Connor Bedard scores 50 goals this year. And that's just, I think that's more likely than it is than he, is the 60-ish point guy we saw last year. So, yeah, I think Connor Bedard as a one-off is my preferred way to play him. My second favorite is with Seth Jones, believe it or not, even at 5,800. And then I sort of get to like, okay, let's stack Teravainen, let's stack the power play. By the way, is it Bertuzzi, Hall, Jones? Is that what I remember seeing?
No, wait, it wasn't Hall. Wait, was it?
I thought it was.
It has to be. Yeah, it has to be because it definitely wasn't Kurashev because that's why we said the under there. I retweeted it. It was Bedard, Teravainen, Hall, Bertuzzi, Jones. Bertuzzi was net front. Hall was in the bumper.
Yep. So Teravainen at least is on one of the flanks, which is good news. If Carolina was obviously just a very different situation, so take these with a grain of salt, of course. But there's at least a possibility that Teuvo, is better, much better, or much worse than his stats from last year, rates wise. So if you want to bet on Bedard, bringing someone along with him. Obviously, during best ball season, we were looking at Bertuzzi a lot. Chicago decided to lose, I think, a combined 18-2 to Minnesota in the preseason. They played 2 games and got absolutely railroaded both times with their full roster against full roster. It was just a demolition. So yes, it's nuking the first line for no reason, but also those games were so bad that they might matter. This team might still be terrible. So that's why they changed things up. Which is to say, it's very possible they switch it right back, or that they move, Nick Foligno to line 2 and Mikheyev down to line 3, and then Bertuzzi up to line 1. I think you can play Bedard with whoever on Chicago if salary works, but because Teravainen is the cheapest of the bunch, I just think he's the safest forward. But in reality, I think the main draw here is Seth Jones as a stacking partner. Thoughts on Alec Martinez, because he's 5,100. He's certainly going to be less than 10% owned, and he's a guy who can get you 7 blocks in a game, no problem. So does him on this top pair interest you if he plays 25 minutes, or are you just kind of no, I have other defenders that I just want to play that have more point upside?
Haven't happened yet. I get the exact situation you're building out is why you could consider it, but I think that if you do a full game stack or something, and for whatever reason in that full game stack you can't find the money for Seth Jones, it just is never getting you exactly what you want, and I think you might want to reevaluate. Then sure, but I just you need Martinez to at that price hit the blocks bonus and have at least 1 point. And then hope that no other defense. He's 1,000 off the most expensive defenseman, I'm pretty sure. So it's just really hard to see him scoring at that big of a volume without multiple points. So it's I'm never playing him alone. I think I'm always finding the money for Seth Jones.
Yeah, I will just say, if you have a Sergachev or not Bertuzzi or Dursey lined up, obviously Sergachev is going to be just very, very, very chalky at 4,300 with the role that
Yep.
he's looking at in Utah. But if you're looking at, the Florida Boston doesn't go your way, St. Louis Seattle doesn't go your way, like if you're trailing going into this final game, I cannot think of a better way to like pivot your
Yeah.
lineup than to just say like get rid of my Utah and switch to Alec Martinez, because if Utah is failing, Alec Martinez is almost certainly going to be a slight favorite to outscore like the Utah defenders just based on how he acquires his points blocks wise. And as you can see, like on the sheet that I'm sharing, his shot rate per minute was actually better than the average defenseman, which like doesn't mean a ton because he's old and bad, but like he's not totally dead to getting you a few shots and maybe scoring a goal off of someone's ass or something. Like you see some of the other defenders on this team and like they just do not shoot like at all whatsoever. Connor
And I
Murphy,
mean,
TJ Brody, so on.
they're like that. That's the problem here is that like this team is still very bad, and it's like you're naming players, and I feel like you're almost like kind of like I think a lot of people at least are saying
Well,
like, oh, like actually these are not that bad comparatively to last year, and it's like,
okay.
what did any of these players move the needle for this team other than Bedard becoming, like you're saying, a 90-point player? That's the only way this team is even remotely relevant. So again, I agree with everything you're saying, and I think the sharpest thing we're probably going to give anyone, and hopefully some people take our advice. If you're losing, do not play Utah. Just swap all the way to Chicago, because on one game it doesn't matter that much. But yeah, this team is bad, and I do like this game a lot, and I will have a lot of Bedard because yeah, and I think one off Bedard
Here's
is probably the way to do
oh,
it.
okay. Well, yes, thank you for that. But the big reveal, I hinted at it, before we started the official podcast portion, but Utah, I did not realize just how dire their situation was defensively.
It's
This team
bad.
is horrific defensively. They don't have John Marino to start the year. I believe that's due to an injury. But like we'll read some of the names in a moment, but obviously the big ticket acquisitions were Sergachev and Marino. Sergachev immediately slots in alongside Sean Dursey. Yes, they get to a legitimate top pair.
Yep.
The rest consists
And then
of
what
Ian
happened?
Cole. Yeah, the rest consists of Ian Cole, Vladislav Kolyachuk, um, Yuso Valimaki, and Robert Bertuzzo. Robert Bortuzzo is still in the NHL. Like, this
Who
is
he
a
played
really
for?
tough situation. Yeah, yeah, literally. I don't think I would have gotten that before
Like
looking at the
yeah,
blue line.
I had the same thought.
And
Like I have listened to the Puck Soup who he played for, and I was like, these idiots. And then I looked through and I was like, huh, Robert
yeah,
Bertuzzo, huh? Like crap. They could have had me
like
on that one.
holy shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is again very tough scenes defensively. And you look at the forwards that Utah has, and they're not going to win any Selkies in their NHL careers, if I may say so myself. So I kind of so that kind of leads me back to the like just play Bedard at all costs and just figure out the rest. But let's actually talk about some of these forward options because they do look very enticing on the offensive end as well. So, do you want to just start things off with Keller, Hayton, Schmaltz?
Yeah. I do think it's Kesslering over Bertuzzo, by the way, based on the lines they ran, but
Okay,
I'm
you
not
might
sure if
be
that
right.
should actually change.
I was very
Not a big
quickly looking at daily faceoff because I was doing this,
you idiot.
in the setup. And yes, that you should never do that. Just always use my Twitter lists
It
if you have
it
the time.
is
Because
correct other than that, and it's not a big deal, but just
Michael
whatever.
Kessering's actually good, I think. So that might change things
He's
slightly.
better than Robert Bertuzzo if he actually puts me in. Like it's still
You
like
know what?
this team is still bad defensively. Like I do think this is the problem with Utah is that they're just the worst Senators from last year. Only their goaltending was played well
Uh-oh.
for them. So it's like
Oh god.
they have all this offensive power and all this talent, but I don't think they're going to protect the goaltending very well. And if
Yeah.
Connor Ingram is going to win the Vezina, he's going to win the Vezina. Like nothing I can do about it. But like I don't know. And I wanted to convince myself, and I remember I said it on the pod, like to you and Jay, and you guys both were like, dude, they're not that good. And I was like, wait, crap. Sergachev doesn't actually fix all of their problems, does it?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah,
John Marino, like, okay, now you plug in Kesselring, and then you plug in John Marino, and it's like, okay, like, you can live with the need a
the
cold
semblance.
turnover
Yeah,
every now and again. But like, man, it's still rough, depth wise. And frankly, it's still rough defensively for the forwards. Like, Logan Cooley, Dylan Gunther are probably not going to be stopping much. And I don't know who they're going to throw out there against, especially without Nick Bukestad. What are they going to do against Connor Bedard? Are they going to play Kraus, Doan, and Matthias Michelli? Like, I love Matthias Michelli. He's not anywhere close to what Nick Bukestad brings to the table defensively. So, like, I don't know. I think that Chicago is a lot more interesting than initially meets the eye, just because of the offensive slant of these Utah pieces, and these Utah pieces are quite expensive. So like you're kind of sacrificing stuff that you're not sacrificing when you play Chicago here.
yeah.
But anyway, I didn't. I don't think I let you talk about the actual Utah stacks that we're
Yeah,
trying to get into.
I'll go right in order here, really quickly. The Keller, Hayton, Schmaltz, all power play one correlated. It's very, very good. Hayton is going to be popular. I think Hayton and Sergachev are going to be two of the most popular plays on the slate. And I don't think it's wrong. I'm going to have a good bit of it myself because, frankly, it's not bad at all. I do think that you want to include Keller, and that could help boost Keller's ownership a bit. And again, that's kind of getting into the situation where it's like, am I playing Bedard? Am I playing Pasternak? And again, it can kind of get in your head maybe more than it should, because I think the decision should be Bedard over Clayton Keller personally. But regardless, second thing is, if you aren't double checking, and I definitely would, make sure if you're, for whatever reason, clicking on Jack McBain, that you confirm he's in the lineup, because they had Yamamoto as well, and it didn't seem
Yep.
definite and apparent that it was Jack McBain, and I didn't see confirmation, and we may not get that to warmups. I kind of honestly think it could be Yamamoto. He was very, very good in the preseason, adds more of an offensive element. I think that does help the Cooley Gunther line a bit more, but I definitely think that that's one that, like, people will be playing Gunther, and for good reason. Like, and he was very, very talked about, not just by us idiots here. Like, real people as well in the media space were
Mhm.
talking about how good this guy is, and people love to jump on players like this, especially players that rewarded a lot of us last year. We'll
Yeah.
go right back to the well. So definitely keep an eye out on that. Logan Cooley was not in the top power play. Like I basically have already told you, it was a top line plus Gunther plus Sergachev. Um, Jersey, I don't want to say he's become unplayable at that price. You could
Yeah,
probably
he's
find a way because of how gifted he is, but
he's just stuck at
I,
last year's price when last year's role is not there for him.
yeah. So, but on a 3-game slate, it's playable. Again, like we said, a 10-game slate, I think you're just not clicking on that button.
Mhm.
You could do it here. I don't think you even need to force in a Josh Doan or anything like that. Like, you could just play it like it's still 5-on-5 and not play I wouldn't play Sergachev as well, because you're basically just completely getting the leverage off Sergachev and saying that, like, they don't score through the first power play. And Sergachev doesn't really seem like there's a reason why he'd get more 5-on-5 points than Jersey, but they must see something in his game that they like a little bit more on that first unit, which I'm happy about for my best ball bags, but
Mhm.
we'll see what happens here. So, all that being said, I'm going to have quite a bit, because I equally think that Chicago, as I already said, I think they're even worse defensively, because a lot of their guys just aren't entirely NHL quality, or have been given up on for good reason. So, yeah, I'm going to have quite a smattering of that top power play, and then fill in some pieces around it. But probably in this game, I'll play Bedard at the highest clip.
Yep, I'm pretty much right there alongside you. I also don't hate the idea of playing Gunther, Bedard, and then literally us the other two games. Like,
Yep.
it's very, very likely that if those two players get there, that their line mates at their respective prices, Yamamoto's 2,500, McBain 2,700, that their line mates just don't get the shot volume to warrant like like, okay, say that Gunther scores twice and Bedard scores twice. One of them's a power play goal, one of them's a 5-on-5 goal, and they each get 5 shots on goal. It looks very likely that's the case because Cooley is absolutely a pass first player. You can see that, even though he picked up a ton of points in the NCAA, that the shots just, they were fine because he's a really good player, but like he's not going to be a shoot first guy in the NHL. McBain has never shown any propensity for shooting. Yamamoto, I think, is even worse in that respect. And then for Bedard, Mikheyev is certainly not stealing, fantasy points or whatever. And Teravainen is, yes, in Carolina, he looks decent on these metrics. But as I said, I think there's a very real possibility he's either far lower or far better. But, just the system is so much different in Chicago than Carolina. And before he went to Carolina, he was a very pass first type player. Oh, sorry, what did you say?
I said, I wonder what could be the big difference between Carolina and Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, about these two teams.
I think there's something in the water, maybe. I don't know.
It's the pizza style, deep dish and whatever they make in Carolina.
Precisely.
Pizza.
So anyway, where I was going with that is that Bedard and Gunther could really centralize fantasy points just on them. And they still correlate well with one another, because if the game goes super power play heavy, like you're just running into all sorts of game environments that don't involve Keller, Heat, and Schmaltz getting, say, 15, 20. And Gunther could easily get 25, 30 in those circumstances without anyone else on the team, putting up that 12 points even that like McBain would need at his salary to be in a GPP contender. And Bedard, the exact same situation. So that's how I'm looking at, doing some of my builds. And obviously I'll mix in some Turgachev because like 4,300 is a joke of a price. But I really do like the game theory angle that like Gunther and Bedard offer together or individually as one-off pieces in a way that I don't really think exists many other places on this slate between the other four teams in these other games. So
yeah.
Anything else you want to say about Utah?
No, I think we can kind of transition into like the overarching thoughts on this slate. Overarching thoughts.
Overarching, yeah. Tom Olsen, who's the kid on the second pair. That I read that name earlier. Vladislav Kolyachuk. He's been in their system for a few years. He was just a player in the AHL last year. I think he's 26, so like he's literally just a dude. There's nothing to him to be 4,400. I'm not sure how they got that price, but he's just a dude. Don't worry about him.
The fact that he's more expensive than Sergachev is really the one thing on this slate that just made me throw my hands in the air. But like everything else was pretty good, so I was like, I guess I'll take. What is the ownership going to come in on? Right? No, that was his price.
No, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, that was definitely right because I remember seeing. But like, he does not look like a high point producer. I don't think we get block shots in the AHL, but like that's the only angle I could see here.
No,
like Kimmy and Cole are going to eat defensive minutes, and the DraftKings messed up one price, but I kind of guess again, like everything you just said, and it makes sense for GPP. But the way you play that exact situation in GPP, let's just say, for example, you said I'm going to take Sergachev, Gunther, and Bedard. We've talked about this ad nauseum, and I think that a lot of the sim conversation in the NFL right now would centralize around the same point. Only in NHL, it happens a lot. Is like you can build a 5-man stack in hockey on a slate like this, and it wins way more often than you think. And there's no reason to believe it couldn't work here because, again, it's a one game. If on one game Seattle scores 5 goals, if on one game, and like how often does that happen? And how often is it centralized around one player getting 3 points and then the other? Like that all works really well. And these are two players that make so much sense to include in that type of a stack. I think that's like a really good way. And sorry.
And just to build on that, the 5-man stacks, like obviously the goals themselves like are the most important part. It's just getting, an offense, betting on an offense. But there are also direct correlations that are not as clean as, say, line 1 is these 3 guys, line 2 is these 3 guys. Like it could be something as stupid as, okay, Liam O'Brien and Pat Maroon meet pregame and they say, all right, these new fans here in Utah, they want to fight. Let's get it. So, 2 minutes into the game, they're both on the ice. They drop their gloves. Guess what? Utah and Chicago have 11 forwards for the next 5, 6, 7 minutes, depending on when the whistle is. Well, that means that, maybe Clayton Keller now goes down to line 3 because Josh Doan is playing as the line 4 center for a shift. And so it's Michelli, Krause, and Keller, and they score a goal. Like, that stupid shit happens all the time because it's the NHL, and it doesn't mean that you can't stack across these lines. like you just got to make sure that they're all good plays in a vacuum, like along with one another. So, obviously, that specific case, those guys are pretty expensive, so you got to kind of make it work, theoretically speaking. But like, these overstacks are bets on just the chaos that an NHL game can bring to not only the actual results, just as far as 5, 6, 7 goal games, but also just like single goals can have random players, especially when they're the superstars, like the Clayton Kellers of the world, who will just play more minutes than Barrett Hayton in this game, for example. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess all of this again to say, like, if you're building cash, I think we kind of have pointed out the best plays in this vacuum. So you can kind of also take this, like, I think these players are incredibly cash viable in Gunther and Bedard, and then kind of build around that with some of these cheaper options to kind of get you squared away. But why don't we do our top stacks, guarantee goals, and get out of here? Because I'm ready for
Let's
bed.
do it. All right. Yes, DJ has 78 more lineups to build before he can go to sleep. So,
I know, and I'm sick. Do I sound as bad as I think I sound, or is it not that bad?
No. I will say I honestly wouldn't know that you were sick if you
Really?
didn't tell me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I was unable to talk, so that's good. Like I truly I couldn't have done it. Like I would sound like nothing. Goalies don't matter, Wookie. That was like the first thing I said. Get with the times.
Come on, Wookie. Come on, man. What are you doing?
Like I honestly could only tell you one goalie I'm unequivocally positive is starting. And that is also probably Mrazek.
That is also true.
And Bobrovsky. Two. I could say two because Mrazek has to start basically. So
yeah.
No.
We're just gonna ban Wookie. It's fine. Just leave. Just don't even bother sticking around for top stacks guarantee goals.
Hate to see it.
Hey, goalies, pick a goalie. Not one against one of your skaters. Okay, cool. You did it. Great job.
You've won.
That's all there is to it.
And still win.
Yeah, that too. On this slate, if you played, Bedard versus Ingram, that could certainly still work because Bedard gets 8 shots and a goal. It really doesn't matter. So I think you'll be fine.
Okay. Top stacks for me. I think that I'm gonna end up with. Let me just pull up my exposures. Let me just take a peek here.
There we go. This is what I was talking about. Like usually it's just like off the cuff, random pea-brain nonsense. DJ has actual lineups that he's like put heart and soul and sweat into, and so now you get the fruit of his labor with just the absolute alpha here.
I mean, I think what I'm going to end up with the most of though is, and like I'm just starting a lot of lineups with this Sergachev, Hayton, Gunther, Keller, and I think I will end up with a lot of that plus Bedard. Because I don't know how many people are going to play it that way. I might end up adding even a 5th Utah guy into some of those teams. And then I might conversely, I think at the end of the day, I'm going to end up with like 85% Bedard, maybe higher, maybe even get to like, I don't know, depending on how many teams I end up building. So like, it's going to be really interesting how that works out for me and how I want to build, because I'll do some with just 1 and 1, but I think overall I'm going to overstack Utah and then bring it back with Bedard and just hope that like Bedard either gets there late or gets there with all the volume in the world, because I think that was 2 sets really, but I think I'm gonna have a lot of 4 and 5 man Utah.
Okay. I will take.
I'm a chalk donkey.
Yes. DJ sniffed out the chalk successfully. He does that regardless of preparation, though. Let's not give him too much credit.
Oh, don't worry. I'm gonna save it in a second. Unless if you take what I'm gonna take, but we'll see.
I think I'm gonna take what you're gonna take because I'm chomping at the bit here for the Shane Wright, Bjorkstrand, and Brandon Montour trio. I think the world of Shane Wright. I think he's an awesome. I think he's going to be an awesome fantasy player. And again, I think that Shane Wright's in a unique situation where he's not going to be super hyped. I think Matty Beniers on his own team gives him a lot of coverage. I think that Bjorkstrand at 5,500 gives some coverage too. And that the power play too, that yes, we ball knowers know that it's not really a power play 2 in the sense that like Edmonton's power play 2 is power play 2, but it's just like a 1B. That's the assumption I'm carrying going into things. And I honestly would even add Eli Tolvanen into this. I know at 3,700 on no power play, it's really tough to see him getting more than 13 minutes time on ice. Um, but he is a really gifted creator. He's a really gifted goal scorer. And, I think there's a chance that he overtakes like Schwartz or Stevenson for their job at some point this year. But just, in a 1 game sample, I'm certainly not going to say Shane Wright and Bjorkstrand are what you need and play them in 10 lineups and not have exposure to their line mate. And Tolvanen, who I really like as a player as well, and can honestly hit the shots bonus even without the power play role. So a little bit of Tolvanen, but primarily speaking, Wright, Bjorkstrand, Montour.
Yeah, no, I mean that's kind of a lot of what I'm toying with, and then on the other end, I'm looking at the Kyrou, Falk, Busnevich a little bit more than the Robert Thomas. Like I said, I just think that on paper, it makes a lot of sense to go Neighbors and Thomas for the price, and then force in Falk, and like I just don't know if that's the way I'm going to do it. I do think though, playing the 4, if you will, maybe even all 5 of that power play, like that will be in my mix. Like, so yeah, I like. It's funny how I like both sides of that game. That it just feels like that's the game that most people are going to throw their hands in the air and not do it, or do it in a way I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I'm
And
gonna
it
end up
also gives
probably
you
going with a lot
information.
more of that game, and then yeah, right, and then go with a lot of the Utah, and then throw it back with Bedard and play around with that as much as possible. Find the right way of building it, but like the only issue becomes Pastrnak, which is why I'll probably also it's why you make 50 lineups.
Precisely. That's why you just cover all the combinations and win money. Um, for my final, I will go with the Florida top line. I think salary wise, it's not too tough to fit them in. But like there's at least a chance that if people are, rushing to play Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz and Dylan Gunther, that maybe they're coming in lower than anticipated. I don't know. But they're pretty much the only fully correlated top line on the slate that like doesn't have a piece that I don't like. Matty Beniers and Pavel Zaka, like when Alex Barkov is the worst fantasy player on your line, you're probably a really, really, really good line.
Yep.
So like just getting them at any price. Again, I don't think salary matters. I'm fine punting off D if I have to. I'm not, I'm not scared of Mikhail Sergachev burying me 100% of the time. Like it's just, there's
Yep.
no defenseman like that on this slate. So give me the top line. I'll make the salary concessions to make it work with another stud.
Yeah. It would just be impossible to do guaranteed goals without including some of the guys we just mentioned. So,
Yep.
I will just say that, Shane Wright, Bedard, I think they make a ton of sense at their price. You could take a look at a lot on Utah. On Utah. Oh my God, I almost just thought I was wrong because that sounds weird. But
Will you just
is
pick
there
a
anyone
guaranteed
else
goal,
that you
sir?
might want to? Yeah, it's Connor Bedard.
Okay, you picked Connor Bedard. We use 11K on DraftKings salary. I will start sharing my screen again because that probably helps to see the salaries. Connor Bedard is 7,300. We use 11K as our range just to sort of keep things fair. And yeah, we guarantee goals. So if you're the type who wants to, speculate on goal props or whatever, feel free to tell us. But yeah, that's sort of how we orchestrate the end of these podcasts. I do like the Bedard pick. I'm going to go Dylan Gunther, 6K. Just too cheap a price for a guy who, yes, you mentioned it, so I didn't really feel the need to give the soliloquy. But like this dude is already an NHL superstar offensively, in my opinion. He flashed it at the end of last year for half a season. He was incredible. There's nothing about his game, about his profile that says he's anything but what he was last season. And what he was last season was far, far, far greater than a 6K player, let alone a 6K player in a matchup against the Chicago freaking Blackhawks with a possible supernova breakout star in Logan Cooley, who was the 3rd overall pick just 3 years ago.
I swear, as I'm like clicking on these, like putting them in for a second to look, Bedard just disappeared. That's fine. God, I think I'm just gonna go Gigabrain punt. I think I'm gonna go with Dylan Holloway at 4-1, just playing with Robert Thomas. I think that like comparatively to a lot of these other
Yeah,
guys. I just like him a little bit more.
30.
It's him or
Yeah.
Tolvanen.
You had
37.
3,700. I
But
would say Burakovsky was also in the mix there.
oh,
Um,
you know what? Go Burakovsky. You're right. That
okay.
makes more sense.
Yep.
Honestly, I was gonna say Shane Wright, and then as soon as you said the 11K thing again, I was like, oh duh, that
Yeah.
doesn't work.
You
But
know, I get where you're coming
Shane Wright is
from the
longer odds than
Sabres.
Burakovsky. So
Huh. Yeah.
yeah. So I think
Maybe I'll take a look. I don't know.
it's plus 380 or plus 320. You know what? We'll just ignore the price for a second and say I think Shane Wright's a better option than any of these
Yeah.
guys.
So
So whatever. We're not constrained
with
to these laws within society.
Okay, well, we are because this is a daily fantasy podcast. But thank you, DJ, for your Bedard Burakovsky guaranteed goal segment. For mine with Dylan Gunther, I will go Jake Neighbors. Fits in under the 5K remaining I have. Playing alongside Robert Thomas. No Kairu there. Sort of is like a double-edged sword again, in that Kairu shoots so much that like there are more shots available. Yet Jake Neighbors is probably not the the piece that Robert Thomas needs to really get this thing popping off, if you know what I'm saying. So I'm gonna bet though on the power play, sort of carrying him and his I think 30 goal campaign last year, just continuing into this game. And again, I think I like this game more than Boston, Florida, just from a potential upside standpoint. And scroll back to earlier in the podcast or video if you want to hear me talk more about that game in detail. Anything else you want to cover before we get on out of here?
No, definitely give us some follows. Been getting quite a few. Love the new people coming in, engaging. I'll post some stuff tomorrow as much as I possibly can, but there's 3 games. I'm not going to force in 72 bets because I only think there's a few good ones on the board, and we went over them from the beginning. Yeah, just ready for an exciting season, and make sure to set your lineups before it locks up, 3 hours before normal.
Yes, 4:30 Eastern lock, so be sure you're on top of things there. Get on in the Morningscape Podcast Discord. If you want the link, just DM DJ or I on Twitter. I am at Fake Moods. DJ's at DJ_Mitchell94. The podcast is at Morningscape Pod. If you want to hang out after I close out the show on the YouTube, I'm just going to go through the tabs I have up one by one, just so that if you want to screenshot them or whatever, you can look at them and reference them without having to scroll through, a 2-hour video with all of what went on. So in any case, though, thank you to everyone who supported us throughout the offseason. Hopefully your best puck bags are packed with all of your favorite players and none of the hurt players. And make sure you subscribe to my newsletter, moods.beehive.com, or it's linked on my profile on Twitter and also in the Discord everywhere. So just pop in, and I've been writing some stuff in the off season and in the lead up to this season with some thoughts. And I do plan to maybe cover in an article the Wednesday slate. So stay tuned for that, depending on what the slates look like contest wise. And we'll be back here on Thursday for a much more condensed version of our game by game breakdown, with a much more normal DFS slate ahead of us on Thursday. So thank you all for listening. From Doug, from DJ, from myself, have a good opening night, everybody, and we will see ya. All right, and here are the tabs for you all. Just going slowly, game by game, so that you can take from this what you want.
You can end the stream, right?
You can end the stream now. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in live. We'll be back here on Wednesday night.